Since Vira has several changes to her base form as well as her transform state, we're going to cover her patch notes a little bit differently than other characters. Instead of going down them in order on the website, we're going to talk about all of her base form changes first and then discuss her transform state. Vira's forward walk has its movement speed increased. This is the speed before. Her dash also had its acceleration increased. This is her walk speed now. I think it's a little noticeable. More noticeable is her dash acceleration increase. The patch note said that while Vira is a quote-unquote standard fighter, she doesn't have any projectile attacks, so they decided to increase her walk and dash speeds to set her apart from the other characters. It's a buff that she'll appreciate for sure that has a lot of implications for her neutral play. Basically, she's going to be able to run down the opponents far easier than she could before. Vira's close heavy attack had its starter produced by a single frame. It's now an 8-frame normal instead of a 9-frame normal. There are a couple implications to this. It'll be easier to frame trap with now. It might be able to link in certain situations that it couldn't link before for combo routing purposes. It is a small buff, but I think it would be one that Vira does find appreciation for as players lab it out. As a very simple example of what I've been able to find, let's check out these two situations. Before, you could not link a close heavy here. Let's see this combo in the current patch. One frame makes the difference between her not being able to link this normal off of this combo and being able to do so. There might be some other implications to this, as this is very much not a high-level, optimal, match-practical example, but just merely a means to introduce the concept of how important this small change could be for her. The patch notes will say that the heavy version of Dark Kane will have Vira come to a complete stop after the final slash when it hits near the corner. This is intended to make it so that she's not going to cross under the opponent after it hits. However, in my own little bit of testing with some very basic combos, it seems like you can still get this to occur from time to time. I think there the buff was able to kick into effect. But as you can see here, we were still able to swap sides in the corner. So I don't really know how to call this one. I think it's going to take like Vira mains going through their optimal routes in various situations for us to really see if this change is one that's actually realized within the patch itself. The ultimate version of Scarlet Oath in her base form had its block stun on the second hit increased by 2 frames, meaning that instead of being -4 and safe, it's now -6 and punishable. So this is just a flat-out nerf. The light and medium versions of Summon Lumera have been buffed in several ways. Let's look at the way that the old versions behaved. The light version would do 3 hits. Each hit did 300 damage before, totaling in 900 damage. The same is true for the medium version. Although you'll see that sometimes you can get this move to whiff at ranges where you might not want it to. In the current patch, both of these moves now do 5 hits instead of 3. The damage has also been adjusted. Each hit will now do 200, meaning that the total damage of these moves is now 1,000 instead of 900. Lumera's speed before she attacks has been adjusted, and the travel distance has also been increased. They do know that if the foe is slightly in front of where Lumera is supposed to appear, she will now appear on top of the foe. The idea of this is to make it a lot more consistent for summoning Lumera and having her stick to the opponent. At about this range, we saw that the medium version was whiffing before. And now it's actually able to hit. Do note that with the extra 2 hits to these moves, you do have increased frame advantage on hit and on block. This is now plus 100 instead of being around plus 86, I want to say. So this definitely is a nice buff for Vira overall. She'd be able to probably use these moves a little more, have stronger setups with them, do the increased block stun, as well as get better conversions off of them with the extra hit stun. This would be said example of such combo routes you can do with the new changes to light and medium Summon Lumera. Oh, we're not ready to talk about that yet, are we? The ultimate version of Summon Lumera has seen some changes, a combination of buffs and nerfs, I'd argue. The startup used to be 18 frames. I Additionally, you had full screen tracking before. However, as you'll note, on regular hit, the foe will pretty much always fall backwards, meaning that you get an air pickup from this situation. The same was true if Vira was transformed. As you can see, the opponent is still knocked up and then knocked down. Now let's get into how it currently works, because there are a lot of implications here for Vira and how she's going to plan out her strategy against the opponent when it comes to these changes. To get us into it, the startup has been increased by 3 frames, so now it starts up at 21 frames instead of 18. You're going to also notice something very important about the way that Grant just reacted from that hit, but we'll break that down in a moment. The startup frames are important because Vira has a little more difficulty comboing into this naturally now. Basically, a reliable way of getting this to combo is to get a close heavy, and then you'll be able to land this combo. This will also have extra extensions if the opponent is in a crouching hit state, as that gives extra hit stun frames. We also need to point out that the tracking on it has been nerfed. This seems like a big deal, but really what this is part of the rework of Ultimate Summon Lumera in order to give Vira a fast-track way of converting into a transform on hit. Allow me to explain. As you might have noticed with Gran, he no longer is launched by the Ultimate Summon Lumera. Instead, he is knocked backwards onto the ground into a state where you're able to interact with him. A similar state applies to when you use Ultimate Summon Lumera in your transform state. As you see, he will completely fall to the floor in a crumple, whereas in her normal form, Gran will fall back down, but then get back up. Practically speaking, it doesn't make too much of a difference because you're going to run up and get Ground who confirms off of this. This has a lot of implications for your combo game, your combo routing with Vira, but also for your strategy, because once you get this hit, you are able to link in to your 5U, Blade of Light. Effectively, this means that off of particular hits, you're going to be able to transform at the cost of half of your gauge consistently, instead of having to wait for the full stock of it, or be throwing out your Blade of Light on as a Hail Mary mix-up. This is phenomenal stuff for Vira that is going to completely streamline her game plan, and I bet you most competitive Viras are going to be basing their strategy around getting this Ultimate Summon Lumera to connect to then go into their transform state. This change also has big implications to her longer combo route sequences, both in her base form and in her transform state. As an example of what you can do in her transform state, we got a little Twitter clip here from Speedy on Noida. Which corner are we going to? Any corner. The travel speed of Vira's Blade of Light has been increased. This is so that it matches her dash speed. The idea of this move is that it is supposed to be a mix-up between if Vira is running at you or if she's trying to command throw you to get into a transform state. So this is a buff that makes some sense. The final thing to discuss with base Vira is nerfs to her Lumera Merge. Basically, all of these are trying to make it so it's easier to punish on block. Before, it was -9 and it had a little bit of pushback to it, meaning that the opponent might get like a far normal at these ranges instead of getting a bigger damage combo for what it effectively can be used as a reversal super. It was disproportionately punishable compared to other supers that the cast had. Now it's had its recovery on block increased by 6 frames, so instead of being -9, you're now -15. Additionally, the pushback on block has been decreased. This is to make it easier for the opponent to get like a close heavy starter on this to actually get a good punish on Vira for going for this and for them successfully calling it out. You will also note that the hit stop has been increased by 6 frames. This is to prevent Vira from losing out on her usual confirms on using this in combos or as a successful reversal that makes the opponent get hit. Now let's get into transformed Vira and her new properties. The first thing to go over is her air dash. The movement speed startup has been reduced by 3 frames, so now it starts up in 10 frames instead of 13. Additionally, there's input buffering when used mid-jump. This is to make it easier to activate sooner right after jumping. This is how it looks now. And this is how it looked before. While there's going to be some things that are similar here, a change of 3 frames opens up a lot for Vira in terms of her pressure, as well as her combo routing, which we're going to be getting into as we go through more changes. The transform Vira is now able to cancel her jumping medium into an air dash on hit or on block. As an air-to-air, it feels like you can only get pickups from counter hit. Still, it's nice that she's able to improve these things, but the fact that she doesn't really get combos for normal hits does limit what you can do with this in terms of her regular combo routing. You will also note that there seems to be a height requirement to get this air dash cancel. I can't get an air cancel when I'm that close to the ground on a jump in, so it's not like you're able to do a jump in with jump medium and then do an air dash cancel to throw out a second overhead. When transformed, Vira's medium red burial sword has a couple of changes to it. Before, it was a very weird reversal to punish. It was fully invincible, however, it was very tricky to do so. As you can see, it had plenty of pushback and was only -6, and at this range, for a lot of characters, they weren't going to be able to actually punish this. The way that you had to deal with this was take advantage of the gap between the first and the second hit and spot dodge it. This seemed to be too obtuse of a matchup knowledge thing for most players, so Cygames and Arxis decided to change this. For starters, you'll note that there is no more gap between the first and second hit since they increased the block stun of the first hit. This basically means that if the opponent commits to blocking this, they're stuck blocking it to create the same outcome situation every time. You'll also note that the pushback on block has been reduced and the frame recovery has been increased by 9, meaning that instead of being -6, Vira is now -15 and close enough to eat a close heavy as a punish. This is basically just streamlining this DP to behave like other DPs within the game. So instead of this being a weird knowledge check the opponent has to pass, now it just sort of behaves the same as all the other DPs in the game. So take that for what you will. To make sure that the Okizeme remains the same, they did increase the bounce height on the opponent on a successful hit to make sure that Vira is still +25. So rest easy on that. When transformed, Vira is now able to combo off a medium Scarlet Oath thanks to additional ground bounce height. Plenty of potential here. Ultimate Scarlet Oath in Vira's transformed state sees the same changes on block data. Once again, instead of being safe at this distance, she's -6 and therefore punishable. As compensation, she is now able to combo off of this in her transformed state. This has a couple of cool implications for her combo routing. Towards the end of light and medium Summon Lumera, Transform Vira can now cancel from that special move into Grace View. This has tons of setup potential for the transformed version of Vira. There have been several changes to her Grace View special as well. For starters, the follow-ups that you can do after the fall follow-up from Grace View are now 4 frames faster. Before, if you try to do something with this, you weren't really going to get much for it. As you can see here, there's no combo happening here. Compare that to now.
Excellent.
You can actually get some really cool corner loops going on here, and this has a lot of implications for Vira's potential combo routing that I think players will be experimenting with for quite some time. There is 2 changes to Falling Strike, one a quality of life improvement and the other an actual in-game change that I would argue is a buff. There's now an input buffer for Falling Strike, making it easier for you to queue it up and have it come out as soon as possible. I'll attempt to do the same timing for my previous button press here. As you can see, I get it out this time. Falling Strike had another big change, one that I think is going to have big implications for combo routing using Grace View follow-ups. Before, if you swap sides with the opponent, Vira would not turn around to face them. As for now you finally track the opponent. And I namely talk about this in terms of combo routing as well, just because in a game where there is a block button, I put a little less stock into using moves like this for potential left-right mix-ups that are tricky, because it will catch some opponents who don't use the block button, but against an opponent who might be expecting it and train themselves to hold the block button, you're not really going to get utility out of it in those situations. The last change to Grace View and its follow-ups is to that of Retreat, which now has iframes from frames 1 to 10. gives her a reliable way to disengage from situations and not get caught up by anything in the air, so she'll be taking to the skies with Grace View more often, I would say. Do be aware, though, that there is no iframes against throws using this option, so the opponent can still call this out by jumping and throwing you. Vira is massively buffed in this patch. While she is going to notice a couple of things that hurt a little more thanks to like the nerfs to her ultimate Scarlet Oath, for example, she's more than compensated for such minor little changes like that basically fall in line with the universal system mechanic changes with just how much juice she has been given in this patch. Faster movement speed is always huge for any character, especially one that wants to fight at close range like Vira does. Being able to access her transform state for the cost of half of her SBA gauge instead of having to wait for the full cost of it is massive for her, meaning that it's more likely that she's going to be able to snowball into this state more often than not off of guaranteed setups. The changes to the light and medium version of Summon as well means that they are more reliable tools for her offense on knockdowns. That means she's able to save cooldowns for other situations and for more dastardly mix-ups. Her transform state feels more fun to play with as well, I'd argue, with the changes to Grace View, as well as the extra air mobility. There's a lot to explore with this character here, and I'm excited to see what other top-level Vira mains can step up to the plate to demonstrate what this character is capable of in the next patch. I feel like she has great potential to be a high-tier character. It's just going to depend on what other characters surrounding her and her matchups with those that are going to dictate where she falls on that tier list. Still, rising star, that is what Vira is.